We can acknowledge how ridiculous the expectations are on moms, and it can feel like, why are we even talking about something like this? Why are we even showing up and saying that this is a legitimate thing when it's like, it's stupid. It's dumb that we feel this way. But the thing is, those societal norms, those societal expectations that we're up against are very real. Welcome to the Sparkle Project. I'm Emily, a divorced mom of two on my own journey to shine a little brighter. This podcast is here to help you protect your sparkle amidst the chaos and impossible expectations of modern motherhood. If you're a mom ready to choose yourself and shine, you are in the right place. Let's dive in. Hey, it's Emily, and welcome to the Sparkle Project. This podcast is all about identity and self-discovery and motherhood. And there is something that has been coming up over and over again in the cultural conversation that I believe is one of the biggest components to why, as mothers, we feel completely all consumed by this role in the sense of identity when it comes to who we are and how we identify. And that is mom guilt. Mom guilt is something that I have talked about so many times over the years. It is one of my absolutely favorite conversations to have because I think mom guilt is an experience that is extremely pervasive in our culture, and it can be really hard to talk about in a way that both validates the experience of mom guilt that so many of us have, while also shedding light on the fact that mom guilt is a social construct. And I have seen mom guilt coming up again and again and again over the last few weeks on my social media feeds, in conversation with other moms, and I have a lot to say. So what better place to do that here on the Sparkle Project? My goal of this episode is to help us all understand what exactly we're experiencing when we experience mom guilt, to both help us process that, but also to understand and have language around how to talk about those experiences. Because there's the work we can do on a singular individual level to make our experiences as moms less shame-inducing. But there's also change we can make on a societal, cultural level when it comes to how we talk about mom guilt, when it comes to how we talk about the shame we're experiencing in motherhood, because we don't want to perpetuate and normalize those things being normal necessarily if we're trying to, dismantle the patriarchy and all of that. And so that is what we're going to do here in this episode. I am so thrilled that you are here to be a part of this conversation. And I hope that you walk away maybe feeling a little bit less mom guilt, or at least having some of the tools and understanding to be able to start processing it differently. So let's jump in. So I want to make clear right off the bat what I'm actually talking about when I use the term mom guilt, because it's kind of a misnomer in a way. And I think it's important that we lay that out there from the get-go. When we are talking about mom guilt, or at least when I'm talking about mom guilt, I am talking about an experience of both guilt and shame that moms feel in response to societal messaging we get about what it means to be a mom and what we should do, who we should be as moms. And it's really important to highlight right there that it's both guilt and shame that is kind of summed up in this term mom guilt. So it's not just the experience of guilt. There's something deeper. We're making that guilt mean something about us and experiencing shame. The reason we don't call it mom shame is because mom shaming is a different phenomenon of explicitly shaming moms for behaviors, right? Which can lead to mom guilt, but it's just not quite the same thing. But what is the difference between guilt and shame, and what does that mean when we're talking about mom guilt? So guilt is one thing. When we feel guilty, we experience the sensation of we did something wrong. We did something out of line with our values, what we determine internally to be the right way to do something, the right way to exist. And this can be on a more societal level. We can think about like a law, and if somebody breaks a law, they may feel guilt for doing something outside of that norm, that like set way of doing something right by societal standards. Or they might not feel guilty, and that might be problematic, right? If somebody is on trial for committing a horrendous crime and they don't feel guilty, as viewers to watching a trial or something, we might see that person as having something wrong with them in terms of like what it means to be a quote normal human, right? Guilt is completely normal to experience. And it has a really important function, because if we are doing something, acting not in accordance with our own values, that's something we're going to want to know and act towards correcting, right? So I'll just give a really simple, not unique example here of how guilt could show up in motherhood. Not talking specifically about that mom guilt and shame, although this could lead to that, but just feeling guilt because something happened that's out of line with your unique values. So say you are a mom who values kindness and teaching your child to try to emotionally regulate when going about things. If you get upset, you want to try and emotionally regulate before having a large reaction, right? We want to respond rather than react. That's something that you may hold as a value. And yet, when you were addressing a behavior that your child had, you got really snappy and maybe shouted. And let's be real, like maybe it was more than a little shouting, because we are moms, we are real people. Like, things get out of hand sometimes. It may be completely normal to experience guilt around that, and that guilt may motivate you to change. It may motivate you to sign back up for therapy because you're realizing that you are not having enough spaces to process your emotions, and you don't want to keep handling these situations in the same way. So that guilt could actually be a really good thing in helping you make change. Now, of course, it's important to note in that situation that some level of not being able to emotionally regulate at all times is normal. But it's also true, though, that that guilt can help us act more in accordance with our own values. Shame, on the other hand, is making something we did wrong mean something about who we inherently are. So back to that example of snapping at your kid, shouting at your kid, full on yelling at your kid. We can stop at that guilt level of, oh, that's not how I want to act. I'm going to do something about that. But oftentimes what happens is it turns into this shame of good moms don't yell at their kids. I yelled at my kid. I'm not a good mom. I'm a bad mom. And we start to internalize those messages, that shame, and it festers. It can really build up and fester over time. That right there, when we are experiencing the guilt about something and it turns into shame, it turns into something about us, something wrong with who we are and how we're showing up in the role of mother, that is the experience of mom guilt that I'm talking about. And you can see in that there's an important call out here of the fact that the values that we're holding ourselves to, sometimes they are our own values, right? We might feel like, yes, I value patience. May not have it all the time, but I value patience. And when I act out of accordance with that value, I want to do something to correct it most of the time. But when we make it mean, I value patience, I wasn't patient with my kid, not just holding that to my value of I value patience, but now I'm holding it to a value of good moms don't yell at their kid. That's not my value. That's not something that I said. That's a societal thing. That's something that I've been told. And maybe I've internalized it and taken it on as my own, but like that's a societal thing. If I really think about it, do I think that a mom who yells at her kid when she gets really frustrated and overwhelmed is not a good mom? No, that's not actually my belief, but I'm making it mean that here. I'm taking societal messaging, societal values that are not actually my value, and now making it mean something about myself. I'm now a bad mom because society tells me good moms don't yell at their kid. I yelled at my kid. So we're actually like holding ourselves to a different standard. It's not the standard we actually have intentionally set for ourselves. It's the standard that society has told us is what has to happen to be considered a good mom, a good enough mom, not a bad mom, whatever it is. Okay, so simple enough, right? But here's the thing. The societal messages we get about what it means to be a good mom, what it means to be a good enough mom, what it means to not be a bad mom, they're not real. They are not things that we can actually attain. And that matters. That really matters, because if we are constantly holding ourselves up to some societal expectation of what it means to be a good mom, and at the same time, we cannot attain that expectation because one, it's just like not that easy to do, but two, there are contradictions within that. Like it's literally impossible to be everything that you're supposed to be if you're going to be considered a good mom to societal standards to everyone. It's absolutely impossible. If that is what's happening, we are going to be constantly failing, and we are going to be constantly experiencing mom guilt. Guilt that we're doing it wrong, and shame that we are not a good mom because of it. But the thing is, good moms are always trying to attain good mom status, right? We're always trying to do better. We're always working on ourselves. We're always trying to be the best version of ourselves for our kids. And yes, that may be true. But the way that society expects it is that we are constantly striving for that perfection. And again, remember, we're never reaching that perfection. That's impossible. So we're always just striving and we're always falling short. So we end up experiencing mom guilt constantly. It's really just like a normal expected part of being a mom. And I think this is where some of that cultural conversation that's happening right now is coming from. Because we've normalized this language of mom guilt in a way that can feel almost problematic in a way. Like we're normalizing the experience of moms to feel guilty for things that we shouldn't feel guilty about. If you think about how a mom, just like on a societal level, we expect moms to be with their kids all of the time. So like a mom should want to stay home with her kids, right? A mom should want to be with her kids all the time, 100%. Right there, very present, very engaged, playing, doing all the things. And we expect moms to feel guilty, A, if they're not doing that, and B, if they don't want to be doing that. Because the reality is that's not for all of us, right? Like that's not the life I would choose. But society also really devalues care work. And so being a stay-at-home mom is not seen as something, again, on a societal level, as something that has innate value. And so society also sees a mom who is staying home and like meeting that expectation of staying home with her kids, being the one who's present with her kids all the time. Society sees that also as something that's wrong because you should be contributing. Like, come on, stop mooching off your husband, right? Like, there's also going to be a sense of you should be doing something different coming from society if that's what you're doing. Again, this has nothing to do with what you internally value. This is societal messaging that I'm talking about that probably at some point has gotten turned into something that you've taken in internally. But it doesn't stop there because that mom who is supposed to be present and caring and loving 100% of the time with her kids is also supposed to somehow get back her pre-baby body after having kids. I don't know how she's supposed to do it because she's supposed to be with the kids 100% of the time, giving them all the attention. So like working out doesn't really, that can't happen because you can't focus on that. You're focused on the kids. And she should also be somebody who gives all the attention to her partner because a good mom is also a good wife. But she's supposed to be with her kids 100% of the time and caring for them and being present with them 100% of the time. But also he needs to be taken care of too, right? Importantly, her house should also be a lot cleaner than mine is. She should have all of that under control. Do you hear the should there? She should be able to do that, even though she's supposed to be playing with her kids, being present with her kids. Do you see how the societal shoulds, the societal messaging that we are constantly getting, and again, this isn't individually we're constantly getting this. This is societal messaging that we have very likely all taken in at some point. It's giving us these shoulds that are impossible to stand on. They're not real. And we can sit back and acknowledge, like, yeah, that's, for lack of a better word, fucked up. Like, there's nothing called dad guilt out there because dads don't experience that type of guilt. I'm not saying dads don't experience guilt, and I'm not saying dads don't experience shame because I know that that's not true. Of course, a dad who yells at his kids, who holds the value of, I want to do things differently than my parents did or whatever, like very likely will feel guilt if they do something out of sync with what their own values are. And they may feel shame from that. But it's not because of some societal expectations that good dads keep their cool. When they're spending time away from their kids, right? They're out of town for a week. They may feel guilty. They may feel shame. But it's not because of some societal norm that dads are supposed to be with their kids 100% of the time. That societal norm does not exist for dads, does not exist for men, period. And so we talk about mom guilt. We talk about this experience of mom guilt, and we can acknowledge how ridiculous the expectations are on moms And it can feel like, why are we even talking about something like this? Why are we even showing up and saying that this is a legitimate thing when it's like, it's stupid. It's dumb that we feel this way. But the thing is, those societal norms, those societal expectations that we're up against are very real. Even if it's a construct, it's very real that we are given these messages. And so there's work we can do internally to kind of reprogram ourselves from defaulting to the guilt and shame that comes with not living up to those standards. But those are the standards that we've taken in. So in my eyes, it is crucial that we name the experience. We name what it is. This is mom guilt that we are experiencing. And to go a step further, we need to understand what mom guilt is. Everything that I've just shared with you. We need to understand that mom guilt is not just like, I feel guilty because I'm a mom. It's guilt and shame brought on by not living up to societal expectations that have been shoved down our throats more or less since the moment we were born. When we have an understanding of what we're actually experiencing when we experience mom guilt, it can change our relationship to it. It can change how we decide to address those feelings, how we decide to make changes within ourselves. Instead of focusing on making impossible changes to ourselves that are never going to satisfy the external values we're trying to live up against, we can focus on intentionally getting clear on what our own values are. That right there makes a massive difference in how you see yourself and how you can move forward. Because the expectations, the values, the standards that we're held to behind mom guilt are not going away anytime soon. As much as we can do the work to break down what is considered normal in motherhood, we do live in a patriarchal society. We do live in a culture where these messages are not going to just disappear. But if we can recognize what's happening, and if we can talk about it and understand it together, we have the power to make a difference. We have the power to change how we show up to motherhood and to life. Mom guilt is a very real experience that impacts so many of us. But I want you to know it's a lot less personal than it feels. Just because you feel like you're failing, just because you feel like you must be a bad mom because you're not doing something exactly according to societal standards, doesn't mean it's true. And when we can start seeing that for what it is, we can start reclaiming the parts of our identity that have been consumed in this cycle of guilt and shame that we are so often stuck in motherhood. That's what I want for every single one of us. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Sparkle Project. Please consider sending this one to a mom in your life who may benefit from this message. We are all living in this wacky society, and we can use all the conversations about this that we can get. We'll be back again next week with another guest episode. Until then, keep on shining. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Sparkle Project. Loved what you heard? Share this episode with a friend, and don't forget to leave a rating and review to show your support for the show. We'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.